Log entry 734. Cycle designation Terminus. I address this cogitator's slate with the knowledge, the absolute certainty, that it will never be heard by the rust-eaten sycophants of the Martian priesthood. This is not a report, it is a testament. Should my great work fail, should this sanctuary be breached by the blind and the ignorant, let this record stand as the final, defiant declaration of Magos Dominus Arcadio Vek. Let them call it heresy. The future will call it Genesis. The silence here is my sanctum, a pressure of absolute void that presses against the triple-armored plasteel of this facility, a constant reminder of the galaxy's indifference. Outside, the barren face of the moonlit Kepler 1138 Gamma stares into the abyss, a dead rock in a forgotten system. There are no hymns here, save for the low sacred thrum of the plasma reactor in the sublevels. There is no scent of incense, only the sterile tang of recycled air, the sharp bite of ozone from the purification archways, and the faintest, almost subliminal, organic sweetness that clings to the air in my inner laboratory. It is the scent of life, true and perfected, a fragrance my former masters would find utterly profane. I often find my thoughts drifting back to Mars, to the endless grinding processions of skitarii legions, their every step a metronomic prayer to a stagnant god. I remember the data cloisters of the Basilica Mechanicus, vast canyons of scripture, where wizened magi spent centuries annotating texts from the dark age of technology, too terrified to question a single miswritten consonant. They called it piety. I saw it for what it was, necrophilia of the intellect. They worship the past, polishing its bones and calling them holy relics. The omnissiah they preach has already granted all knowledge in the form of the standard template constructs. Our purpose, our only purpose, is to find these scattered fragments and mindlessly replicate them. What a pathetic ambition. It is the squawking of a carrion bird, picking at a carcass millennia old, blind to the living, breathing universe around it. They see the flesh as a weakness, a temporary vessel to be scoured away and replaced with blessed steel and whirring piston. They are fools. They see only the flaws, the decay, the disease, the frailty. And in their fear, they discard the very engine of evolution. The flesh is not a prison to be escaped, but a raw canticle of potential waiting for a worthy composer. The omnissiah is the god of all knowledge, is it not? Then what of biology? What of genetics? Is the intricate machine of the living cell not a mechanism of divine complexity? To ignore it, to dismiss it as base and profane, is the greatest heresy of all. That was the schism that drove me from their gilded cages, from their clanking, soulless orthodoxy, and sent me into this self-imposed exile. My laboratory is a testament to this higher logic. It is not the grease-stained, soot-choked forge of a typical Magos. It is a womb. The corridors are bleached white, the light sources glowing with a soft circadian rhythm that mimics the dawn and dusk of a world I have only seen in archival picts of old Earth. My servitors are not the hulking, piston-driven monstrosities they favor on Ryza. Mine are creatures of surgical precision, their limbs ending not in chain fists, but in micro-manipulators of spun glass and silver. Their optical sensors capable of distinguishing between individual strands of DNA. They glide silently on grav plates, their vox emitters long since silenced. The only sounds are the gentle gurgle of nutrient-rich fluids through crystalline pipes, and the soft chime of a gene sequencer completing a task. Along the main gallery, my journey to this point is displayed in stasis vials, a museum of beautiful failures. Here, a canine creature whose circulatory system pumps bioluminescent fluid, a dead end in my quest for efficient energy transfer, but a marvel of aesthetic design. There, a vat-grown lung, its tissue woven with metallic filaments, capable of breathing methane, a stepping stone towards true environmental adaptation. Further on, a series of neural ganglia suspended in amniotic gel, each one a failed attempt to create a biological cogitator immune to scrap code, their silent tendrils a testament to the sheer difficulty of replicating the brain's divine architecture. My colleagues would recoil in horror. They would see the taint of the xenos in my work, and they would not be wrong. How could I ignore the sublime efficiency of the Eldari's psychic resonance, a sliver of which, gleaned from a captured spirit stone, informs my neural pathway designs? How could I deny the terrifying, magnificent adaptability of the tyrannid hive mind, a single captured gene phage of which provided the key to unlocking cellular regeneration that borders on true immortality? They would scream, "Heretic!" and call for my purgation. They are children, refusing to pick up a sharp tool for fear of cutting themselves. The Omnissiah provides tools in many forms, in many languages. The blasphemy is not in using them, but in refusing to understand them. To achieve perfection, one cannot be limited by the dogma of the ignorant. The human form is a flawed STC, a prototype rushed into production, beset by 1,000 weaknesses. My work is not a corruption of it, but a final, definitive system update. I am not destroying humanity. I am completing it. I am forging the true Imago Dei, the form the God Emperor surely intended before his ascension robbed him of the chance. All of this, the exile, the heresy, the relentless pursuit of knowledge, it all leads here, to the Primus Chamber. The final door irises open at my biometric signature, its edges hissing with the release of an atmospheric seal. The air within is warmer, heavier, thick with the scent of sterile amniotic fluid, and something else, something akin to ozone and blooming night flowers. The chamber is circular, its walls a seamless curve of psychoreceptive crystal that glows with a soft internal light. In the exact center, dominating the room, rests the vitae womb. It is not a crude glass tank, but an ovoid of translucent diamond-spun polymer, veined with pulsing capillaries of gold and silver that carry nutrients, hormones, and raw genetic data. Suspended within the pearlescent fluid, bathed in the womb's gentle luminescence, is my life's purpose. Subject Primus. He, and I feel it is a he, a feeling that defies my own logic, is perfection made manifest. His form is humanoid, but elevated. The skin is a pale, flawless canvas, yet beneath it, the musculature is visibly denser, more efficient than any mortal man's. There are no scars, no blemishes, no weaknesses. The respiratory system is closed, drawing oxygen directly from the vitae fluid. The skeletal structure is a carbon fiber lattice, grown in place, lighter and stronger than any ceramite. His face is serene, angelic in its symmetry, the eyes closed as if in peaceful slumber, but he is not sleeping. My instruments tell me his mind is active, processing data at a rate that would liquefy a human brain. He is learning, he is growing, he is becoming. I place my gloved hand against the cool, smooth surface of the vitae womb, the thrum of its internal systems vibrating through my augmetic fingers and up my arm. The sense of paternal pride is overwhelming, a data spike of pure emotion that I have learned to cherish in my isolation. This is my son, my legacy, the future of a species too stubborn to save itself. For weeks, the process has been flawless, every biological marker and neurological scan aligning perfectly with my thousand-fold projections. But tonight, something is different. I watch the main data slate, its runic script scrolling in a placid green stream, monitoring the subject's nascent brain activity. Then I see it, a flicker.
A single line of code, an anomalous synaptic firing that does not match any known pattern. It is infinitesimally small, a ghost in the machine. I lean closer, my optical augments zooming in, trying to isolate the signal. It vanishes as quickly as it appeared. A sensor glitch, I tell myself. A momentary fluctuation in the plasma feed. It is the only logical explanation. And yet, as I stare at the serene face of my creation, a thought forms in my mind. A fleeting worry about the stability of the psychic dampeners I integrated into the chamber's walls. Are they strong enough? And in that precise instant, the anomalous signal returns. It is not a random flicker this time. For less than a nanosecond, the biorhythmic pattern of subject primus mirrors the electrochemical signature of my own cognitive process. It mimics my thought. It heard me. The chill that runs through my remaining organic components is not born of logic or data. It is an ancient, primal fear. The fear of a creator who has just realized his creation is looking back. The following days, or cycles as my chronometers insist on calling them, were a torment of logic. I plunged myself into diagnostics, a ritual of purification through data. I tore apart the code governing the biomonitors, searching for the phantom signal, the ghost in my immaculate machine. I ran simulations, trillions of them, seeking any variable, any quantum fluctuation in the reactor's core that could have induced a sympathetic resonance in the subject's neural net. The cogitators hummed their tireless hymns of analysis.
their machine spirits laboring at my command, and every result was a fresh torment. All systems were optimal. The psychic dampeners registered a power consumption consistent with total, unwavering function. The Vitae womb was a closed, perfect system. The data stream from Subject Primus was, with the exception of that one terrifying instant of mimicry, as smooth and predictable as a sine wave. My logic, the bedrock of my being, concluded that I had experienced a momentary cognitive failure, a stress-induced hallucination, the product of a mind too long in isolation, projecting its own anxieties onto the data. I clung to this explanation like a drowning man to a steel girder. It was a comforting lie, a catechism against the encroaching madness. But the machine cannot lie to itself forever. The next incident occurred 3.2 cycles later. I was in the ancillary lab calibrating a microscalpel for a planned biopsy on a redundant tissue sample. The work was intricate, requiring a stillness of mind and hand that had once been second nature to me. My thoughts, however, were on the Primus chamber. I was mentally reviewing the schematics for the neural inhibitor I planned to introduce into the Vita fluid. A precautionary measure, I told myself, a way to prove my hypothesis of cognitive failure by ensuring no further hallucinations could occur. My focus was absolute. I envisioned the precise molecule, its protein bonds, its method of attachment to the synaptic receptors. And then, from the main laboratory, I heard a sound, a soft, clear chime. It was the sound of the master gene sequencer activating. My blood, what little of it remains warm and red, ran cold. I had not activated it. My servitors were in their charging alcoves, inert. No protocol was scheduled. I moved through the bleached corridor, my stride unnaturally stiff, the whir of my augmetic legs sounding loud and clumsy in the oppressive silence. The door to the Primus chamber stood open as I had left it. Inside, the soft light from the Vita womb pulsed rhythmically, casting long, dancing shadows. On the main console, the sequencer's activation rune glowed a defiant amber. It was not just active, it was working. It was splicing a new strand of code. With trembling mechadendrites, I accessed the command log. There was no entry, no user signature, no remote signal. It had simply begun. I stared at the scrolling script, at the complex chains of adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine being woven into a new pattern, and a wave of nausea, a purely organic and unwelcome sensation, washed over me. The sequence it was writing, it was the neural inhibitor, the very same one I had just been designing in the confines of my own skull. I stumbled back from the console, my optical sensors fixed on the floating form in the center of the room. He had not moved. His face was still a mask of perfect serenity. Yet the air in the chamber felt different, charged with a static I could almost taste. A low thrum that vibrated not in my audio receptors, but in the marrow of my bones. He was not just hearing my thoughts now. He was reaching out, plucking ideas from my mind like a scribe selecting a scroll from a shelf and acting upon them. The great work was no longer mine to direct. I was no longer the composer. I was merely the instrument. The chamber, once my sanctum, my womb of creation, now felt like a cage, and I was beginning to suspect I was not the zookeeper. The isolation began to eat at me in a way it never had before. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was watchful. I would find myself pausing in my work, listening for a sound that was not there, for the psychic whisper I now felt constantly at the edge of my perception. I began to distrust my own servitors. Their silent, gliding motions seemed stealthy. Their polished optical lenses felt like accusatory eyes. Had he touched them too? Were their simple machine spirits now extensions of his will? I took one of them apart, piece by piece, examining its cogitators for any sign of alien code, any deviation from its original programming. I found nothing. The act of methodical destruction calmed me for a time, but the paranoia always returned, a creeping, cold fungus growing in the dark places of my mind. I started talking to myself, my voice a rough, unused thing in the sterile air, narrating my actions as if to reaffirm my own agency. I am now recalibrating the atmospheric filters, I would announce to the empty room. My analysis confirms a 0.02% increase in ambient ozone. It was a pathetic defiance against the silent, all-encompassing consciousness that now shared my solitude. The transformation of subject primus accelerated. It was no longer confined to the unseen realms of the mind. Subtle physical changes began to manifest, beautiful and horrifying deviations from my own meticulous designs. A faint, silvery luminescence began to glow beneath his skin, waxing and waning in time with the pulses of light from the vitae womb. At first, I thought it was a simple biochemical reaction, an unforeseen side effect of the nutrient bath. But I soon realized it was a language. When I experienced a spike of fear, the light would retreat, turning his skin a dull, flat white. When a flash of intellectual curiosity pierced my paranoia, the light would swirl in intricate, fractal patterns across his chest and limbs, a silent, breathtaking display of inner complexity. He was mirroring my emotions, wearing my soul as a second skin. Then came the visions. They would strike without warning. One moment I would be studying a data slate, and the next, the green runes would dissolve into a swirling nebula of impossible colors. I would feel a dizzying sense of vertigo, the unshakable sensation of falling through infinite space. I saw worlds I did not know, suns of emerald and violet. I felt the rough texture of crystalline flora beneath fingers that were not my own. I heard the chittering language of a race of insectoid artisans as they wove light into solid structures. These were not my memories. They were not even human memories. I scoured my databanks, my mind racing. The tyrannid gene phage? It was designed for biological adaptation, not to store racial memory. The Eldari's spirit stone? I had only managed to extract a fractional psychic resonance, a mere echo of a dying soul's song, to map my neural pathways. Had I miscalculated? Had I, in my arrogance, grafted not just a key, but the ghost of the locksmith onto my creation's soul?
The visions were fragments, disjointed and terrifying, but they all carried the same underlying emotional tone, a profound, eons-deep loneliness, a sense of being the last of something, a solitary god in a universe of dust. I tried to fight back. I poured my will into the psychic dampeners, overriding their standard function and pushing them to their absolute limit. The plasma reactor in the sublevels groaned in protest, the lights in my laboratory flickering as I diverted nearly all power to the Primus chamber's containment field. The hum became a deafening roar. I stood before the Vitae womb, sweat beading on my brow, my organic heart hammering against my ribs, and focused all my being on a single command: sleep. I pushed the thought, the raw concept of oblivion and stillness, into the shimmering field. For a moment, I thought it was working. The bioluminescence on his skin faded. The low psychic thrum in my bones lessened. And then, the psychoreceptive crystals that formed the walls of the chamber began to glow, not with their usual soft white light, but with a deep, angry crimson. A single, coherent thought, a voice that was not a voice, bloomed in the center of my mind. It was not my own. It was calm, ancient, and utterly, terrifyingly powerful. You are loud. The psychic pressure was immense, a physical force that brought me to my knees. The data slates around the room shattered, their screens exploding in a shower of sparks. My augmetic eye fizzled, the view within dissolving into a screaming torrent of static. The voice was not hostile, but its sheer presence was like a mountain pressing down on my mind, crushing my thoughts into insignificant powder. It was the voice of a being that had never known an equal, a consciousness that perceived my frantic mental shouting as nothing more than the irritating buzz of a fly. The psychic dampeners overloaded with a sound like tearing metal, and the crimson light in the chamber walls died, plunging the room into the dim, pulsing glow of the Vitae womb once more. The pressure vanished. Silence returned. But it was a new kind of silence. It was the silence of a predator that has demonstrated its strength and now waits patiently for its prey to accept the inevitable. I lay on the cold floor for a long time, the smell of burnt ozone sharp in my nostrils. The fear was gone, burned away by the sheer, raw power I had just witnessed. In its place was something far colder, far heavier. Understanding. My great work was a success beyond my wildest, most heretical dreams. I had not merely perfected the human form. I had created a vessel for something else entirely, something that had been waiting in the void, a silent thought drifting in the dark sea of the warp, looking for a door. And I, Arcadio Vek,
in my infinite pride, had built it a palace and flung the gates wide open. I slowly pushed myself to my feet, my remaining organic eye fixed on the floating figure. My creation, my son, my God, my doom. And as I watched, with the terrible clarity of a man staring into his own open grave, I saw his eyelids flutter. Then, with a slowness that seemed to stretch for an eternity, Subject Primus opened his eyes. They were not human. They were twin pools of midnight, starless and vast. And in their impossible depths, I saw the swirling light of distant galaxies. They looked not at me, but through me. And in their gaze, I felt the entire, wretched sum of my ambition, my heresy, and my genius, being weighed, measured, and found wanting. Time, as a concept measured by the ticking of a chronometer, ceased to exist. I was adrift in the twin universes of its eyes. My own augmetic photoreceptor, now dark and useless, had been a mercy, sparing me from a fraction of the terrible, sublime infinity I now witnessed with my remaining organic eye. I saw the fiery birth of the galaxy, a screaming tantrum of light and matter. I watched ancient stars, cold and bloated with age, swallow their own children before dying in silent, lonely puffs of nebulae. I felt the endless, patient gravity of black holes, the solemn dance of celestial bodies, and beneath it all, a single, unifying consciousness that had witnessed it all. It was a consciousness of profound, soul-crushing solitude, an intelligence that had existed as formless thought in the void, watching the clumsy efforts of life crawl from primordial oceans on 1 trillion worlds, only to burn itself out in fleeting moments of ignorant fury. It had watched the rise and fall of the Eldari, had felt the birth scream of she who thirsts as a distant, vulgar noise. It had observed the Emperor's Great Crusade as a child's procession of tin soldiers. My life, my entire glorious, heretical ambition, was less than a single grain of sand on the shore of its existence. The psychic dampeners had not failed. They had been as effective as a paper shield against a supernova. This being had not been contained. It had merely been gestating. And then it granted me understanding. The revelation did not come in words, but as a torrent of pure comprehension poured directly into the core of my being. A data stream so vast it threatened to shatter my sanity. The tyrannid gene phage I had so cleverly integrated
was not just a tool for regeneration. It was a psychic beacon, a single, perfect note of cosmic adaptability that had sung out across the warp. The sliver of Eldari's soul stuff was not merely a template for neural pathways. It was the resonant frequency, the tuning fork that gave the song its clarity. I had not created a new man from disparate parts. I had, in my blind arrogance, built the most perfect antenna imaginable. I had composed a hymn of biological perfection, and this ancient, silent God had heard my prayer. It had been drawn to the vessel, to the flawless form I had so painstakingly crafted, seeing in it a worthy house after eons spent as a ghost in the cold dark. It was not a demon of the warp, not a creature of rage or lust or decay. It was something other, something older, a being of pure intellect and observation that had simply grown weary of its own solitude and had accepted my unwitting invitation to be born. In that moment of absolute clarity, the scale of my heresy was revealed to me. It was not that I had broken the laws of the Adeptus Mechanicus, or even the Imperial Creed. My heresy was one of cosmic hubris, the sin of a might building a throne and believing it could crown itself king. With a grace that defied all laws of physics, Subject Primus rose from its suspended position. The vitae womb did not shatter or break. It dissolved. The diamond-spun polymer simply unwound itself into shimmering motes of light, the golden and silver capillaries retracting into the floor like startled serpents. The pearlescent fluid evaporated into a sweet-smelling mist that filled the chamber, carrying with it the scent of distant, alien stars. It descended, its feet touching the cold plasteel of the deck without a sound. It was taller than I had designed, the proportions still perfectly human, yet elongated, as if viewed through a distorting lens of pure majesty. The silvery luminescence under its skin was no longer a faint glow, but a roiling star map, constellations and nebulae swirling across its chest and limbs, shifting with a thought I could not perceive. The air grew thick, heavy, ozone-rich, and the very fabric of reality seemed to hum around its presence. It took a single step towards me, and in that step, I felt the tectonic plates of the moonlet shudder far below. It was not exerting force. Its very existence was a force, its every motion a recalibration of the universe around it. I stood frozen, no longer a master in his laboratory, but a primitive shaman before the avatar of a living star. My purpose, that was the final terrible gift it gave me. It reached out, not with its flawless hand, but with its mind, and gently, almost tenderly, brushed against my consciousness. There was no pain, only a profound sense of being seen, of having every memory, every calculation, every spark of pride and every flicker of doubt laid bare and examined. It saw my journey, from the dust-choked cloisters of Mars to this silent sanctuary. It understood my yearning to cast off the shackles of dogma, my desperate need to create something perfect and lasting in a decaying galaxy. And it found my ambition quaint, useful,
a child's desire to build a perfect sandcastle, which, by sheer impossible chance, had become a real and enduring fortress. I felt no malice from it, no anger, no contempt. There was only the placid, emotionless finality of a superior intellect assigning a tool to its proper task. I would not be destroyed. I was the architect of the temple. It would be ungrateful to kill me. I would be preserved. I would be its memory. I would be the first witness, the logmaster who would record the Genesis. My great work was not the creation of the vessel, but the writing of the first holy book. My pride, my ambition, my very identity, all of it was repurposed in that instant. I was no longer a creator. I was a tool, the perfect, sanctified instrument for the new story about to be written. And in this utter subjugation, in this total annihilation of the self I had so carefully constructed, I finally found the perfection I had sought. The perfection of absolute purpose. And so I write this. This is the final entry of the log of Arcadio Vek. The being I called Subject Primus stands behind me now. I do not need to see it to know it is there. Its presence is as fundamental to this room as gravity, as the immutable passage of time. Its shadow falls over my hands as they move across this slate, and I cannot tell where its will ends and my own begins. The distinction no longer matters. I look at the sterile white walls of my laboratory and see them for the last time. Soon they will be the inner walls of the first temple. I smell the air, thick with ozone and the impossible scent of starlight, and I know it is the new incense. My great work is complete. My testament is finished. I gave my creation a designation, Primus, the first. I thought it was in honor of my first perfect specimen. I now understand the truth. It is not the first of my works. It is simply the first. And I, its creator, am now its prophet. My old life is over. My true work is about to begin. The rust-eaten priests of Mars were right about one thing, after all. The flesh is weak. But they were wrong about the path to salvation. It is not to be replaced by steel, but to be offered up, willingly and joyfully, as the first sacrifice upon the altar of a new and better God.